Okay, it's 5:30. I'd like to call this meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is October 6th, 5:30 at the Thompson Community Room in the middle school. This time, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Owen, would you please read the school board norms?
Sure. The board developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, execute all duties of the school board in compliance with the North Dakota Century Code, properly prepare for meetings, commit to assessing board effectiveness, and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. We have no public communication. And do we have any conflicts of interest to declare? Any conflicts? I'm seeing no conflicts. Okay. Moving on to item 2, consent agenda. I entertain a motion. Is there anything you have questions on or would you like to pull off for further discussion? Anything to pull off? Okay.
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Moved by Jason, second by Owen. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to our regular meeting. 3A, recognition. We have nothing under recognition. B, nothing under correspondence. And C, nothing under reports. D, board education. I'd like to recognize Shelley Moulton, Tim Ranum, Candace Sedler, Lynette Ryan, and Jada Anderson there to discuss core plus more interventions.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm going to start us off just by talking about kind of the structure and the framework for Jamestown Public Schools, and then we'll have some input from the elementary and the high school level. So as it connects to the strategic plan, you guys are probably very familiar with how it's listed in the strategic plan, and so we just wanted to highlight that we have primary metrics at the elementary, the middle, and the high school. And so we'll kind of talk a little bit more about what those metrics and how we're going to measure and how it relates to our data that we gather through our benchmark assessments. Any questions so far? Good, okay. So Jamestown Public School, the MTSS framework starts with Tier 1, which is that core piece, which is our guaranteed and viable curriculum. Then we move into Tier 2. And so I just want to flash the other screen really quickly just to give you kind of like a visual of it. So that Tier 1, that core, is that solid green piece that you see all the way across the triangle. And so when we talk about adding that Tier 2 piece and that core plus, that's when you see a little bit of green and yellow is layered on top of the solid green. So that's how we identify that Tier 2 and that plus core. And then we also have the Tier 3, which is adding the replacement curriculum and some of those other things that student needs for support. So Core Plus is the yellow area, and then our Tier 3 is intensive. It comes down to really individualized interventions for students, higher frequency and more intensity. So usually you phase in to say, everybody gets this. Now we're going to try this with some students, and then if it doesn't provide the supports that we need or we see success with those students, then we intensify it or we provide a little bit more with the frequency and the intensity. And this kind of alludes to the fact that it is the entire framework of our system. So multi-tiered systems of support is kind of how we move through identifying and helping support our kids through Jamestown. I know Adam could probably talk a little bit more about this, but this has kind of been a movement that the whole state is going through, and we have some schools that are really far into it, which Jamestown has been in it for a long time. So we've gone through the process of updating our framework a few times, but it's great to kind of keep you guys in the loop to see what it really looks like here at the different levels in Jamestown. So then why does it really matter? And it means that our students have access. So every student is going to have access to the content that they need at their grade level, but it also means that we're tailoring that instruction to provide additional time, targeted instruction. So I'm going to really talk about the connection to SBL. So it's great because we know where kids are at specifically based on their grade level standards. And so at the elementary level, we know that, okay, they're at a level 2 in 3rd grade math. Well, how can we support their needs with the plus more? Because they're going to get the grade level content, and now we can kind of back tailor it to meet their needs so we can get them up to that level 3, and then continuing to exceed our expectations by pushing kids to level 4. But again, it's a system of interventions. There's a process and kind of how we go through identifying as well as supporting kids and knowing that it's fluid. It's not saying that if you're always at that tier 2 level and always need that plus, you're not stuck forever. It's fluid. You can move up and you can move down as you need the support that you need because standards change, the focus changes in the instruction, and so it's allowing kids to get their needs at that moment, and then when their needs are met, then you go back to getting just what you need for core. And then if you have to come back in and you need more supports, then you can have those supports. So at the elementary level, that Core Plus is our curriculum instruction resources that are provided for all students, and then it's an additional targeted intervention. So we look at how we can do small groups, so having students meet for times to push in with our classroom teachers or our interventionists, or even providing some supports with our paraeducators when we can. But it's a reteach to say this is something that you missed, so that's where that SBL component comes in. We've assessed, we know this is where your skill deficit is, but also we're learning that it's really great for kids to get a pre-teach. So they get like exposed to it before and hoping that something is going to click for them, but then when they hear it with their peers and their classmates for the second time, it's like, oh yeah, now I really know how to interact with my peers. I can feel confident in knowing what I'm doing with my classmates. But it looks like additional practice, so making sure that they have the repetitions, because we've learned through a lot of our professional development is kids need lots and lots and lots of repetition, especially if they're in that level tier 2 or tier 3. And then we also go into tailoring those interventions. FastBridge has been a great resource for us because it is part of our assessment suite. And so we can get, based off of that data, it tells us exactly what some of those kids' needs are right in the moment. And they can even help us group kids, or if we need to look at a whole class intervention to say, this grade level in 2nd grade is really low on fluency. So it's not just 1 or 2 kids, but it's everybody. So how do we lift the entire grade level up? So that's been a really good tool for us to leverage. And again, the goal always is to close the gap, right? We want kids to feel confident and to see that they're making progress and they're learning, but it's at their grade level standard and the expectation. Some programs and products that we use at the elementary. Obviously, we are supporting with Title I, and the most bang for your buck is using teachers to connect with those kids. There's not a program that's going to do all the things that we need it to, but we know that that one-on-one or small group instruction is what's best for kids to learn. So that's where we see a lot of support at that Core Plus at elementary. We use ESGI to help us with progress monitoring. 95% Phonics is a program that we use with our 3, 4, and 5 grades to hit that phonics piece. UFly Foundations and the Portal is available with our 2nd grade students. And then also as interventions, the portal has allowed teachers to put in their student data and kind of spit out some information to say like, hey, this is where you should target certain skills within your curriculum resource. So we're starting to explore that more, and I think maybe Candace could say how powerful it's getting for teachers to be able to have something that's so right there in their hands, able to use quickly. Steve Dunn writing strategies, we know universally we're aligned K through 12, and so that's really good because they're hearing a consistent message on strategies and tools to be using, but then knowing we've aligned. So we know if they didn't get it in 3rd grade and it's nonfiction, then there's probably something from 2nd or 1st grade that we could use from nonfiction to help support those kids. Wit and Wisdom is another curriculum resource that we have for ELA, and I've kind of talked about our FastBridge as well well as how SBL is a powerful component in this. And then at the elementary level, we report our standards through Empower. So that's a live portal for parents to access, and they can constantly see the updated progress of their students and know specifically what standard or where they're at in the scale. Oh, one more for me. So who supports the Core Plus? General education teachers in our Tier 1, and then they also do support students through Tier 2. So again, depending on support availability, if you have extra teachers in your building to support Tier 2 groups, then you can use that through Title I, but it also is part of the responsibility of the classroom teacher. So it really takes a collaborative team effort to make sure that we are hitting student needs with all the teachers that work with those kids. So we provide the Core Plus in reading and math interventions by targeted lessons and supports. Special education teachers also help provide that Core Plus, aligning to IEP goals or replacing the core if necessary for some students. We have paraprofessionals that are reteaching and reinforcing, and then our instructional coaches meet 3 times to review our benchmark assessments, but then we also have progress monitoring that's embedded. So making sure that, again, keeping that a fluid process so that we know some kids are going to need more at certain times, but they are able to come in and out as needed.
Okay, I feel like Jada explained a lot of these already, so I'll just briefly touch them. So how do we identify kids that are in need of Core Plus more? We use our universal screeners, FastBridge and NDA Plus. FastBridge we use 3 times a year, and NDA Plus once for the diagnostic, or for the universal screener. We use our interim tests, FastBridge, and we're starting to use more NDA Plus this year as well. Teacher observations and the evidence they collect. And then along with that, like FastBridge will give you a big ballpark of some areas that students might be in need in. Like for example, if it's the reading test, it'll give you one of the big 5, whether they need support in phonics, fluency, comprehension, vocabulary, phonemic awareness, but then we need to drill down a little bit closer to see, well, what exactly within that big umbrella do they need? So then we would pull in some of our diagnostic assessments to pinpoint the exact skills that students are in need of support of. We use the UFly intervention placement assessment, or the core phonics screener gives us the same information there as well, and different spelling inventories give us some encoding information as well. And then the benchmark data team meetings, Jada mentioned that 3 times a year after the universal screener, the coaches and anyone in the building that can support meets with those grade level teachers. We look through the data and then we plan those interventions. And then we make sure during our weekly PLCs that we are watching that data to see where kids can be pulled in and out of those supports. Lynette and I are going to give you an example of what that would actually look like in action for phonics and for math based on FastBridge. So step 1, at the beginning of the year, we give students the FastBridge universal screener. Maybe a student, the report will say this student needs support in phonics. We know that's a big area, so what exactly do they need? So we would then put in a more diagnostic screener that tells us exactly what they need. So for example, the UFly intervention placement test would tell us where on the UFly scope and sequence they have mastered and where they're starting to see more errors, so we know this is where we need to target our instruction. The letter spelling screener is one that we use in several of the schools too. Scholastic has one too that some schools use too, but it gives us the same information with encoding, so we can see where the errors are in encoding versus decoding. After that, we would plan a Tier 2 instruction that supports Tier 1 instruction. Like Jada said, it could be pre-teaching ahead of time. It could be reteaching after they hear it in their Tier 1 whole group. But that intervention gives more opportunities to respond, immediate error correction. It's usually in a smaller group, so the teacher can hear exactly what every student is saying and how they're responding and give immediate error correction and individualized feedback based on student needs. They would conduct progress monitoring to track student progress. That's every other week. We take progress monitoring data based on their intervention, and then we meet during those PLCs to decide, okay, who is making great progress, who is ready to be dismissed from the group, who is making slower progress, and who is maybe not, or regressing even, and how do we need to adjust that plan right away before students are falling more behind. Lynette's going to give you an example of what that looks like in math.
Our universal screener is the same. It's FastBridge. It would be the A math part. We do not have any diagnostics to drill down any deeper for math. So what we use is our standards-based learning, our priority standards from the grade levels. the students have a pre-test, and then we look at where the needs are, and that defines our group for that particular standard. Then they go through instruction in their small group, and then they track their progress to the standard 3. The teacher and the interventionist track those. This really allows us to have real flexible groups. The math groups are constantly changing because the priority standard is changing. So that's what we do for our math.
So at the high school level, we too, ours is maybe a little bit different because when kids get into high school, they start choosing classes and so on and so forth. And Tim will talk more specifically about Achieve 3000 and so on. But all students are getting that Tier 1 instruction, but some students need more, right? Some students might need it with small group reteaching, a lot of the things the elementary people have talked about, additional practice for things. And then, like I said, Tim will talk more about the Achieve, the adaptive resource that he uses. But we're trying to close those gaps that students come to us with. And as somebody said before too, if a student is in a plus class, can they get back into the regular track, right? There's always that goal, or sometimes they might need to go into a more intense intervention too. So we've got those tracks in place. Do your thing.
Okay, mine's not as neat and organized as all theirs. So at the high school level, so I've taught English 1 plus, this is my second year. So I had 2 periods of that class last year. I think I have 10 kids enrolled now. And I would say that that is a kind of a population that's kind of at risk. I'm seeing kids already with absenteeism and, you know, just different struggles that they deal with. So some of the battle is just getting them there in class. But we use Achieve 3000 kind of to drive, you know, instruction. So you'll kind of see what that looks like here in a little bit. But the students, they take a screener right away that determines the Lexile level. So it's a short screener. I was even talking to a parent today in the, you know, parent-teacher conferences that, I don't know, if they answered 2 questions they guessed on one way or the other, perhaps they start off at a different level. But the idea is that Achieve 3000, they tout, you know, an increase in Lexile if it's run with fidelity. So they kind of say 40 plus activities are done, you should experience a certain amount of growth. And then they, Achieve 3000 also kind of has a variety of lessons that address different standards. There's some grammar, there's some vocab in there. And then what I'm trying to work on is kind of doing a little bit more to kind of fill in some of these gaps. For example, I have a student from like St. John's that came in, so they haven't necessarily experienced the same interventions in the past. So what can I do to kind of supplement and see where they're at? But like long story short, we're just trying to get them to read, you know, better and better to enough level where they can go to a history class to succeed, you know, and just like I said, trying to minimize the gap. But also there's a couple different pathways they can go to. They can go from English 1 plus to English 2 the next year, or English 1 plus to English 2 plus, and there's so many different pathways. And so one thing we've kind of noticed is like, well, if a kid makes a jump from English 1 plus to English 2, maybe they're reading better, but are they missing out on some, you know, figurative language terms or things that, you know, the English 1 kids at the core level maybe have addressed, but they're deficient at. So just kind of myself and the other English 2 plus teacher, we're kind of trying to identify those gaps and trying to address those as we can. But anyway, here's some more on Achieve. So you can see my highlighter there. If you look at the top, it says on average, students attain more than 2.9 times their expected Lexile growth when completing 1 or more lessons per week with an average first try score of 75%. So what each Achieve article looks like is they go in, and it could be just totally whatever they choose, or I can just assign them one specific lesson that each person works on individually, but you know, we're all in the same place. They ask them like a prompt right away, like a pre-reading, and then they read, and then they'll answer like 8 comprehension questions, And then usually there's like a longer short answer that goes along with it. So it's a pretty comprehensive thing. I mean, it probably takes most of a class period. In highlight there, it says, it is fair and reasonable. It says, because the text is matched to every student's reading level, it's fair and reasonable to expect that they can attain a 75% average. I mean, my perspective, I'm a little more skeptical that I'm not always getting kids that get 75%. They say it's fair and reasonable, but for some of these kids, some of these questions even have difficult vocabulary. So we're trying to find a way to kind of, help them. So a lot of times I'll read the question, not tell them the answer, but just kind of explain what the question is, and then see if they can get 75%. If we go back, this is what like an Achieve 3000 will look like. So this is kind of an outdated one, but it says like there's a pre-Lexile score, then they kind of like a growth target. I got kids with a variety of different Lexile levels. So one kid I looked is at like a 495 Lexile level, and if you compare that to like class or grade level, it's like 1,000 is what they should be at. And so when they talk about their growth, might be like 80 to a 100 is kind of what they're hoping is the growth. Well, that's still going to be a huge gap that they have to overcome. So it gets a little closer, but then kids are supposed to be reading better at sophomore level too. So again, that's just like we're slowing down the gap, but not always fully closing it. Here's some key things it said that they tout is that higher than expected growth at every grade level. Achieve 3000 students obtain higher than expected. On average, students gained 89 Lexile points there. And again, it talks about like fidelity. Again, trying to reach that like 40 times that we do it. So if you look at that bottom point, it says students see more than 3.5 times their expected Lexile growth when completing 2 or more lessons with the average first try score of greater than 75%. So that's kind of where we are with English 1 and 2, is trying to do 2 of these per week. Some discoveries we made is that it really requires explicit instruction. So last year I kind of inherited it. English 2 Plus had done it, and he had kind of just let them choose their own articles. And we found like my kids were kind of struggling with that. It kind of ended up almost like an online class, where they're each kind of driving their own instruction. And this is a group that's maybe not going to be successful in an online class. So we're trying to do it kind of more where I hand out a specific article and then we kind of go through it together, each at our different reading level. That way it keeps us in the same place or the same pace. I'm trying to use the kind of the gradual release model where we're doing some guided reading and then teaching them some different answering techniques and questioning, and then kind of hopefully release my responsibility, and then maybe they can start doing things more individually. I didn't know I was the only one that was going to talk about weaknesses, but like I said, there's those gaps that we have between the Core Plus and the core classes. So like even like things like MLA citation and writing a 5-paragraph essay. If a kid moves from English 1 Plus to English 2, are they going to be? I feel like they haven't been equipped to do that, and that was partly on me, last year. But I'm going to make sure that we do essay and talk about MLA writing. If they go from English 2 Plus to English 3, are they going to be able to read The Great Gatsby, effectively and things like that? So vocabulary, figurative language, literary terms, even just like rigor, making it difficult enough where they can handle it. We don't want them necessarily stuck in a Core Plus grouping. And they start thinking that, I'm just with the same group of kids, it's a small of us, we're kind of get a label. We're trying to avoid that and hopefully push them to different levels as they go on. And like I said, missing the base content that the core class is built on.
Okay, so then just talking again about the Core Plus More strives for. So obviously we want to ensure that every student has access to the core instruction, plus those targeted supports. And we have that shared responsibility. It's not your kid, but it's our kid. And we've really talked about that at the elementary level, and as well, I'm sure at the middle school and the high school, is it's not just that kid in your classroom. No, it's collectively our kids. So what are we going to do to support that kid? And then we use our data. So it really drives what we're doing. And like we talked about, we're starting to really drill down into specific targets, and the SBL is going to continue to support that work because we know exactly where we're prioritized and how we can make sure that the kids are hitting those priorities when they need to at their grade levels. So, questions?
Any questions from the board? Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, great overview, really informational stuff, and you can tell that a lot of thought is going into this, and just really thinking about this kind of linear process from elementary all the way to high school. And I think Mr. Random brought up a good point of, not all these kids we're not gonna have them from K through. So maybe if you pick them up in high school, they came from someplace else. And so just thinking about like, how do you control for that? Or even as you're moving from building to building, are there kind of bigger opportunities for tracking data? Or I'm thinking about those deficiency gaps growing throughout time, I guess. And yeah, any thoughts on that?
So as far as when we have incoming students, I know that the instructional coaches look really closely. Again, I'm speaking to elementary because that's what I know. But the elementary coaches take in the data that we get from the school. So their CUME file comes in, and then we're able to see where they at a school that was standards-based grading. If any other documentation comes with them to see what levels they're at. And then it's almost like we kind of go through and make sure that we follow the screening process. So we try to keep it close to the benchmark windows, but we know that our data is going to give us the best information to support that kid. So if they come in November or September or whenever they come after our benchmark window, we still assess them with our screener so that we can see where they're measuring up with their peers and find the best group for them. And then what was the other part of your question?
The other piece was just, I guess, as they're moving through time and maybe deficiencies are growing, are there certain time points between buildings that folks are really looking out for to make it so that when folks get to high school, maybe they're mitigating that deficiency?
So one of the transitions that I know we've started, and you might be able to talk a little bit about it for math, is that we saw that there was success with one of the interventions at the middle school level. And we talked about, well, how can we try to transfer that maybe into 5th grade and see if we can start that intervention a little bit sooner. And we aligned it actually with some of our 4th and 5th grade standards. So that program is called TransMath, and so that's a replaced curriculum that we started using in 5th grade, and we also marked it to say, as soon as we get to a certain point with our other resource, or after Christmas sometime, we actually start our 4th grade in there, so that they can start accomplishing Unit 1 and Unit 2 and get lots of repetition, knowing that they might not go through it as quickly, but the goal is then when we come back in 5th grade and we start reviewing that, we can go faster so that it tracks them in math to be set up to be in a higher level of that intervention, with the goal that before they get to 8th grade and up to the high school that they've already tracked out. So that's some of the work that we're doing. It's maybe a little bit trickier with reading because there's so many different types of resources out there that you can use, and so that SBL really drives how we're trying to address that. Do you have any?
I think Tim made a good point that when they come to us, say as freshmen, and they're reading at a 3rd grade level, I mean, that is a lot to try and make up for, and then they aren't always, maybe they don't come to school, and so there's a lot of things going on. And so I think hearing from what's being done along the way, trying to close that gap sooner rather than later is really an important piece. I don't know if that really answers your question, but.
Any other questions? Can you go back to, I think it was slide 3. Yeah, there was a great graphic that you had in there. That was probably the best visual explanation of MTSS that I've ever seen. Those percentages, I'm sure they're kind of like nominal. Is that kind of what you're seeing in the actual execution of this? Like the 80%, the 15%, the 5%, is that?
So that's like the standard. That's where we want to get, and I think that's
okay.
where our strategic plan comes in, is to know that. But I feel like also what Dr. Leck and Mr. Gaylor did is they looked at like where our actual data is. And so we don't want to set ourselves up for failure knowing that we're never going to achieve the gold standard, but obviously we're working towards that. So if you look at like the elementary level, you know, we're at 70%. And what's kind of interesting is all of this aligns through the work that we do day in and day out, because right now our teachers and our staff are going through our Title I reviews, and so we do our needs assessment. And so we share this information out with parents to say, like, this is where our needs assessment is. These are the things that we know we need to target, how we're going to move forward with action plans. But we pulled our data today and we were looking at, we have classrooms that are there. We have classrooms that are exceeding some of those standards. And so it's doable and we can attain it. It's just we have to have the supports in place, and we need to have that guaranteed and viable curriculum to know that this is how we have to reach all kids, and it takes time, but the people that are doing the work, they're doing good work, so.
Seems like it, so, yeah, thank you. This was a great presentation. Anyone else? Okay, Rob, do you have any
I just wanted
comments?
to say thank you to our staff for coming, taking time. And I know some of you have parent-teacher conferences and other things. So thank you for taking the time to come and share your expertise with the board and to be able to answer the questions from a practitioner's perspective. So thank you.
Okay, that's probably actually a good segue into the progress monitoring for the strategic plan.
Yeah, so we have the progress monitoring dashboard there. As noted, we don't have a progress monitoring until the 20th, but our next board education will be on replacement core. So you heard Core Plus today. Our next board education will be on, well, you heard priority standards and kind of touching on the core a bit ago, Core Plus today, and then replacement core will be the board education for the 20th, and then we'll progress monitor on this framework of the 80-15-5. So unless there's questions, we don't have any additional information there, just we're sharing it every month or every meeting.
Okay, no questions I'm seeing. Very good. Move on to 3F. Dr. Leck, your report, please.
Yeah, so you have the written report. One of the big topics that we're dealing with right now is our calendar. Our plan, as the board is aware, is that we create a 2-year calendar. We bring in a representative group of stakeholders to create those calendars. We usually start with multiple drafts. We discuss each of those drafts, you know, what we like about them, what we don't like about them, and then we look to one of those formats and we play around with the days. You know, as the work of the calendar committee is the democratic process and work. So when we walk into a calendar committee, that isn't a group that makes a recommendation to central office, that makes a recommendation to the board. The recommendation that comes from the calendar committee is what becomes the recommendation that comes before this board. And so one of the things that we've done a little bit differently this year is we wanted to gather feedback from more than just that representative group. They do excellent work, and it's tough work. You know, making a calendar doesn't seem like a challenging thing until you get in there and you look at all the variables and you try to make everybody happy. You know, a calendar can't be everything to everybody, and so you need to set priorities. You know, we can't have a late start, early graduation, 2 weeks off for Christmas break, a long spring break. You know, we can't do all of those things because we have statutory requirements, but the purpose of the survey and the purpose of the representative group is to talk about all of those different priorities and make the best possible calendar we can. It's not always easy. But, we kind of have some standing rules that we look through. But that's one of the reasons we wanted to get all of those variables. So we had 11 different variables that we sent out to staff and asked them to rank. And so at our next meeting in my superintendent's report, so that survey just closed last week, I will provide out the rankings and a little bit of that analysis for you to review, probably at least one meeting before we bring a calendar to you. So I think we're just in the process of getting that calendar committee date in, but that's really what we're going to look at is those 11 variables and try to prioritize what it is that the staff represents as the biggest priorities. This is because we're taking a little deeper dive and getting some feedback. I also took that responsibility to create, we have 4 different calendar drafts for each year, so that's 8 different calendars that we're going to look at. For each year, we did an early start, a late start, we've always started on a short week, so what would it look like if we started on a long week, and then what if we did an early grad? So those 4 options for both years. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be one of those calendars. That's the format. So we start in a format, and then we start playing with days and saying, what if we moved this day here? What if we did this? What if we did that? And that's when we'll come to the recommendation to the board. But we always enjoy this process and to look at our 2-year calendar. I am glad we do a 2-year look, and I think it helps us kind of, get that work done, for the 2-year span, and I'm appreciative that we do it that way. But you can look for that, the kind of detailed analysis of the rankings on the 20th, and then one of our meetings in November, you'll have a recommended calendar. Moving on, later on in this agenda, you'll have a recommendation to approve an agreement. We have continued our partnership, or we're recommending to continue our partnership with the village to provide behavioral health counseling services for JPS students. What I really appreciate about this is working with families to provide year-long care. It's not just during the school year. The students that have needs can continue to see services, and they come in during the summer and continue to see their counselor if they are one of the students that's receiving services. I do want to point out that this is funded fully by the behavioral health grants. It's not a general fund expenditure, and it's the last couple of years it's been $65,000, and that's maintained in this agreement. Also later in the agenda, you'll have a recommendation to approve a school board retreat. My recommendation, based on the survey results that we sent out, is Monday, December 1st. That would be at 5:30 in the central office conference room. I have talked in the past about a desire to move forward with some financial wellness for our staff. And so right now we're working with the village. They manage our employee assistance program. So, that's something we're still working through the specifics of, but really what we want to do is leverage the trainings that they provide and tailor them to what we feel like our staff needs and allow them as choice. They wouldn't be required trainings, but it would be something at the end of the day that somebody could come and choose to participate because they want to know more about, say, budget planning, or they want to know more about estate planning, or they want to know more about where they're at in their different levels of employment. Are they close to retirement? Are they quite a bit far away from retirement? And so there's other planning that they should be doing financially. We just want to support our teachers and our support staff the best that we can. The Title I allocation model study, I've had a lot of dialogue with the board and the state about Title I allocation. And sometimes you have to be careful what you ask for because you get put on a committee. So I will be working on that committee. I'm happy to do that and looking to explore that funding mechanism and see if this is the best model or if there's other models that fit our rural state better. I have included in the personnel hire forms and also in the narrative report, as I stated in my last board report, Jerome Wagner, he served us well for 29 years. His last day was Friday. So now we have Mr. Terry Jones has been hired to replace Mr. Wagner. as our Facilities and Grounds Director. And so he'll be starting his role as soon as all of that paperwork is completed. And lastly, I wanted to congratulate Mrs. Christy Grounds. She's later this week will be receive her commencement in the North Dakota School Board Business Manager Certification Program. So she's achieved mastery in all of her credits, total of 61 of those. That's the highest designation that she can receive, and she even managed to make it through 2 courses from a questionable instructor. So, but she's, I will be there to help recognize her. I think Jason will be as well on October 9th when she gets that graduation ceremony. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Jason?
The behavioral health grant, do we see that, is that going to be running out anytime soon? Do we apply for that every year?
Yeah, that's been an annual grant that we will receive. I don't anticipate, I suppose just like everything else, we always want to make sure that funding continues, but that has been the funding source for this for a number of years.
And that's
State. And that is I didn't say this, but that's the equivalent of 5 days of, throughout K-12. So every day, the equivalent of every day, I mean, we have different counselors coming in different places, but the equivalent of 5 days of service for our students, K-12.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, very good. Congratulations, Christy.
I would just like to thank the board for allowing me to go. It did provide a lot of good opportunity for me to learn a lot of things in a short amount of time. So, although 2 years is not really that.
It really is a big commitment, and Christy jumped right on board as soon as she started attending courses, obviously, to get through this as quickly as she did. So it's a big honor.
Awesome, okay. Moving on to, there's no old business, moving on to new business. Nothing under activities, nothing under buildings and grounds, nothing under curriculum assessment and instruction. Number 4, finance. We have an approval of renewal of certificates of deposit. I'll entertain a motion for that. Moved by Jamie. Seconded by Owen. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. It's been moved to approve the renewal of the certificates of deposit. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving under B, approval of the final budget for the 25-26 school year. Is there a motion? Moved by Jamie. Seconded by Jason. Any discussion?
The only addition the only comment I would make is there has been no changes since we've heard this. At our last meeting, executive summary outlines all of the changes, and Mrs. Grounds did an overview of that at our budget hearing. So no changes since that point.
Thank you. Okay, yes.
Could we get a sense of the unfilled positions thus far? I know it wasn't as big of a number as last year, but just a sense of where that's at.
We're doing actually really well this year. The last time I looked, which was probably a couple weeks ago, we had 12 unfilled positions, and they're all support staff, mainly paras, and maybe 1 or 2 custodian positions.
Any further discussion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the final budget for the 25-26 school year. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item C, approval to submit the resolution for the 25-26 tax levies. Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the tax levy.
It's been moved to approve the tax levy as presented here. Is there a second? seconded by Jacob. Any further discussion? Dr. Luck?
Similarly to the final budget, there's no change as to the recommendations for tax levies outside of what has been discussed in the past. Still at 102 mills, as has been consistent for a number of years.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving to submit the resolution for the 25-26 tax levies signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to item 5, operations. Item A was approval to set school board retreat for December 1st, 2025. That would be at 5:30 p.m. in the central office. I'll entertain a motion. Moved by Jamie, seconded by Jason. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of setting the school board retreat for December 1st, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. at the central office signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to B, approval of the 2025-2026 Wilson and Eagles Arena agreement with Jamestown Park and Rec. I'll entertain a motion. Moved by Jason to approve the agreement. Is there a second? Seconded by Owen. Any discussion? Dr. Luck?
The only change that we've seen in here from this agreement, we've had a very similar agreement in the past, is just in section 10 in concessions. We changed that match practice. The practice that is, what's represented here is what we do. Parks and Rec determines who those concessions are. The language that was in section 10 in the past was not accurate. That's not the practice that we followed. So we changed this section to match practice. Other than that, the agreement is the same.
Okay, so no substantive operations will continue as they have in the past. Okay, cool. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the 2025-2026 Wilson and Eagles Arena agreement with the Jamestown Park and Rec. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 5C, approval of the 2025-2026 MOU with the Village for Mental Health Programming. I'll entertain a motion for that. Moved by Jacob. Is there a second? Second by Jason. Any discussion? Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve the 2025-2026 MOU with the Village for Mental Health Programming. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to item 6, personnel. Item A, superintendent evaluation timeline, there for your information. Dr. Leck, is there anything? Okay. Moving on to 7, policies and procedures, approval of the recommended policies. And if there's no objection, we'll take all 4 at the same time. And unless there's an objection, I'm seeing that. Okay. So I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the amended FDB regarding homeless students, amended FDH, students in foster care, the amended ABCA, copyrighted materials and intellectual property, and to rescind DGA grievance and associated forms underneath here.
If I just make a point to clarify, and rescind DGA, you'd also be conducting a first reading of a new policy, DGAA, teacher grievance procedure. It's just to clarify.
So entertain a motion to that effect. So moved by Jamie. Is there a second? Seconded by Owen. Any discussion?
In the homeless student one, I think there was changed to Jade Anderson. That was just a clerical piece. I think it's supposed
Correct.
to say Jada. All right, cool.
Yep. Oh, Yep, we will clarify that.
Unless there's a
It
Jade
said-
Anderson that's running it.
It says Jade instead of Jada. Yep, we'll, and homeless, FDB. Just a minor typo, we'll change it. Thank you.
I was just proving that I read it.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing nothing, the motion on the table is to approve the amended FDB for homeless students, approve amended FDH students in foster care, approve the amended ABCA copyrighted materials and intellectual property, to rescind DGA grievance, and for the first reading of policy DGAA teacher grievance procedure. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to item 8, approval of the 2025-2026 tuition agreement for Kensel and for Carrington. Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the tuition agreements.
Moved by Jason to approve the tuition agreements for Kensel and Carrington. Is there a second? Seconded by Jacob. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve the 2025-2026 tuition agreements with Kensel and Carrington. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Nothing under other. Moving on to item 4, items for future agenda. Items for future agenda. Okay, if you come up with anything, email Dr. Larson or Dr. Leck. Meetings to be scheduled under item 5. We have the North Dakota School Boards Association School Law Seminar. That's on October 9th, 2025 at 8 a.m. in Bismarck. We have the North Dakota School Boards Association Convention on October 10th, 2025 at 8 a.m. in Bismarck. And our next school board meeting is on Monday, October 20th at 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. Don't forget your monthly superintendent evaluations, Section 4 and Section 5. There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned.